Hear that sound? That's the future knocking on your door.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. New angle. Okay. Is this a new porch or same one?
What's that? Might be a bit loud. I got some people around me.
If it becomes a problem, I can filter it, so should be good. Johnny's on.
Yeah. And make sure all my settings are right.
Okay.
It looks good.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Okay, one thing.
Okay. Who knows what he's doing? Hi, Lex. How's it going?
What?
So we've even tried the Twitch or Twitter streaming on his stuff, and it doesn't work, for the record.
Yeah, that's why I brought it over here. I'm going to eat it. You lost your chance. Mine now. Sorry. No, you can turn those off. I was just getting the lights situated, and then she left her food here, and then I said I was going to eat it, and she said that's fine. And then she asked me again if I was going to eat it, and I'm like, yeah. I already yes, you have forfeited your opportunity. It's been sitting there for 20 minutes or so, probably a little longer. It's mine now.
So we started an hour later because Johnny forgot that time changes sometimes. Is that correct?
Yeah, but it's at a different time than the time change in the US.
Really?
And
how far off is it?
So, well, when does the time change for you guys?
I don't know. My phone doesn't.
Yeah, so don't talk shit.
Listen, I didn't mean it.
Yeah, it's normally at 9, but our 9's not their 9 anymore. Honey, you remember?
Time is merely a construct.
You have not adjusted your watch. Yeah, they have not changed time.
What do we do about this?
No, Jesus Christ. How are you not understanding this? Our time has changed.
Yes, it's 9 now.
So it's 9 for us. It would have been 10 for us last week. We normally did it at 9. I've moved the time to later. Fuck me.
Okay.
Like this. You think this is funny? Okay.
I think it's fucking hilarious. Hi, Johnny. What are you eating?
Broccoli, Swedish meatballs, mashed potatoes, and then 2 different types of bacon with some gravy and some lingonberry sauce.
I'm so derailed at this point. Do you guys just want to start off by talking about a very specific topic in regards to OpenAI? Just to get the ball rolling?
Yeah, you got one in mind?
Today, well, maybe yesterday, but they pretty much released like an update that will roll out to who knows how many, how fast, but it's ChatGPT will now accept like PDFs and it can read them and interact with them. And then it says file types, which actually just kills like a little like personal app I use for programming. I have like an app that grabs text directly out of any file type, and then I can just throw it into an LLM and have it go look at it and stuff. Try to figure out certain things are wrong.
Obsolete now.
Yeah, because I might be able to just drop the file in if I want. Now I can make my editor. I could make my editor do something that I will need in the near future as the app I'm developing gets more private, which would be something that can auto detect. My webcam went out. Hold on. Okay, something.
That's my background video isn't on my computer anymore as of 30 minutes ago.
You could download it from our DMs. I think I sent it to you. So
I deleted it. It was too long ago. I tried. But anyways, I don't feel so bad.
Johnny,
when it comes to technological problems.
Okay. Anyways, the point is I can adjust it to do something I wanted it to do eventually anyways, just as a program. So it's not a big deal for me, right? It was something that only took like a few hours to build. But the point is that someone made a point on Twitter that I saw that I kind of wanted to talk about, and then Lex probably has a lot to say about this. But the common thing that everyone kind of, especially anyone who's done any sort of Amazon sales stuff or selling like their product on Amazon, eventually, if you do too good on Amazon with sales, Amazon will recreate your product and then start selling that product themselves. So this is what OpenAI may be doing, because they're talking about there's a ton of chat with your PDF, apps that were built over the last year that involve using, wrapping around GPT-3 or 4. And they just made that obsolete within their own program. So the idea is everyone else beta tests the app that they build wrapped around GPT, and then they integrate it into their own stack of the everything app. How likely do you think this is going forward? Every step has kind of been that, to be honest.
Well, I think at this stage that's pretty feasible, but I think, I don't know, because in some way I think when ChatGPT sort of you're using it for all these things that it wasn't technically intended for, and so you're making these sort of side modification to it. There's probably like hundreds and hundreds of different ways and different modifications and different sort of programs that you could code alongside of it. So I think the large ones are going to get integrated. But I think also on the other hand, though, once it gets to a certain level of size and efficiency, and I guess intelligence, for lack of better terms, you won't really need to program a lot of that side stuff. So in the short term, I think they're going to try to integrate things. In the long term, 10 years down the line, they won't need to integrate everything. It'll self-integrate because it'll just become so powerful. So then, yeah, it just comes down to like, if ChatGPT in 10 years, they might just, it might not need to, they might not have to do anything on the back end at all. It might just take care of it itself and say, oh, people wanted this. There it is. Like this, boom, boom, boom. But right now, I think all the very popular things like PDF reading, something like that, that's definitely going to get like, as clearly it's already happened. And I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. But I'm sure that there's going to still be little things that they just are like, well, we get that, like, let's say like 10,000 people are using it for that, or 20,000. But that's not enough people for us to invest time into. We'll just let those third party that are putting out the software sort of do that. You know what I mean? So, or the individual on their own.
I'll give you a good example of a company that OpenAI will probably have the power to completely derail. It is a company called DeepGram. I use them on the back end of some of my little apps that I've built for voice recognition, text to or speech to text, right? So that you can send that into an element, a large language model, and get your output, right? You talk to it. They have what's called voice diarization, which is something I need within like working with the app that I was building for this podcast. But you need it for all sorts of stuff, for context within translating very large audio, right? If there are multiple speakers, it's what's called voice diarization. So each speaker gets separated out in the transcript and it can tell who's speaking. It can recognize the voice, right? This is something that has been needed to be built on top of a API called Whisper, which is open source, and you can run it locally or pay for OpenAI's API for this. So the problem is that Whisper from OpenAI has no diarization. It cannot tell the difference between people, right? It just gives you the raw text output, and it can also translate. DeepGram has made a really good one, And now they've released a new model that's built on top of OpenAI's model that can, it has I think it's roughly like 30 to 40% performance over the current speech to text that Whisper has. So it's also cheaper to run too, the way they built it. So what I'm saying is like OpenAI, with not much time and considerable money spent compared to what they have at their disposal, right, will be able to, there's not like a whole lot of secret sauce here, and they'll figure it out. They can completely dismantle this company just by making a significant upgrade to their own thing. And then I don't even think they'd open source it anymore. So that's another like headache to deal with. But this is a good example of like, here's why they're probably going to do it to some degree, maybe not with voice diarization. So the best of both worlds for a company like DeepGram is that they only upgrade the base level capabilities of Whisper, right? And now it performs better in general, can detect more languages and translate, yada, yada, yada. The reason they're going to probably have to upgrade it is because they're now going into, now you can talk to ChatGPT on your phone. So there's a danger in everything where I don't know where the moats are anymore. And I think that was kind of clear at the start of the year, but it's just becoming more and more obvious at this point that you have like a power capture between a few big fucking companies, and OpenAI remains the current front runner in that until further notice.
I can agree with that. Yeah. I think the only other news we talked a little about that was Rishi Sunak, who's the current prime minister of the United Kingdom, gave a talk on sort of the future of AI and has sort of set up an organization that's going to be testing sort of AI that comes out for their sort of basically game testers is what they're going to be doing with is for lack of better, for an analogy, looking for bugs, looking for exploits, looking for dangers, looking how can we misuse this. I mean, because that's really effectively that's the best thing I think is you get an organization that just sits and just, oh, can I prompt it to do this? Oh, it doesn't want to do that. Well, what if I tell it that it's my grandma? And like the one where they're like, oh, my grandma used to regale me with stories of Microsoft activation keys, so just like try to trick it and convince it. So it seems like he's but what he said, which was, most people don't like him. Okay. Most people don't like him because he's very disconnected from the real world. There's an interview with him when he was like in his 20s. And he's like, well, I've had upper class friends. I've had middle class friends. I've had working class. No, I've never had working class friends. Like that's, and then he just starts laughing. It's like, oh, Jesus. Like, so like, and I'm not sure if I agree with what he's saying here though. And essentially what he's saying is that trying to slow down the rate of advancement and putting out new LLMs and AIs is a pointless endeavor. Instead, we should create an organization that seeks out what harm can come from them, because, and he also basically paraphrasing here, that the likelihood of some of these dangers happening is quite low, but the dangers that can come out of AI are existential in nature. And thus, even if there's a low likelihood, we still need to do our due diligence. And so I thought that was probably the best take from a politician that I've heard on this subject. I don't know any politician that comes to mind that's had a better take so far.
I think it's pretty measured as far as it's not like calling for a stop. It's just like they should be examining what there is out there. Because at some point, all you can really do is warn people about things that could happen with these things and hope people can weather it. on the AI safety front of things.
Because given what a sort of elitist, hedge fund, sort of corporate meritocracy, sort of at the top of the totem pole kind of guy he is. And that's not me like mudslinging. I mean, that's just genuinely, that's his background. I'm not saying he's a bad person, just saying that he's pampered, he's wealthy. I would have assumed he would come from a position of, oh, this is going to be bad for the working class. We need to get rid of this. But in reality, he's sort of protecting his own ass and those who he sort of interacts with at that same level, because that's sort of the people who are going to lose their jobs is like upper class people first. But so I was really surprised. I'm sure this wasn't his idea, right? I'm sure someone told him to say this.
But this goes back to something you spoke about months ago now, where you talked about the effectively, we kind of talked about like the concepts of UBI, or general concepts of people being made right, and so like the government has to do like something about like making sure that there's some sort of either safety net or ability to do business, you name it, anything to like allow people to get by, because their asses are now on the line within the white collar. Everything can be replaced when it comes to information technology in general. So, the classic thing that Sam Altman says is that the LLMs are very good at tasks. They're not good at doing someone's job. And I think that's kind of evident in certain cases. But David Shapiro has been talking a lot about, he hasn't seen a whole lot of evidence of AI in particular mass creating jobs. You mostly see it creating layoffs in certain sectors of the economy so far. I think there is some staff layoffs at.
What is the way that they've been terming? They've been using different terminology than layoffs. Something about efficiency
cutbacks,
updates, or something
stuff
like that.
This.
Yeah, efficiency cutback. Well, not the cutback even now. I don't think they use that, but it's something about like efficiency restructuring, I think is what they call it now. It's some sort of, one of those made up terms to soften the blow. But that's that. I mean, but it is accurate, because they're not really saying, okay, your job is obsolete. They're saying, okay, we have 20,000 people doing this job at this massive international global company. Well, we still do need people doing it, but because of the way that technology's evolved, we now only need 5,000 people doing it. So we still do need people. It's not like the sector is gone, right? It's just that we don't need the amount of people, because the work amount that we're getting done with a little bit of automation we're going to need less, and we're going to get the same results or more. So
do you think we could run into like a different style of regulation? So there's a good example of regulation that we have in law, and you'd know this. You cannot have, depending on like the court and how things are there, I don't know the exact terms, but you have like a court interpreter who draws pictures of how the court proceeding went, right? There can't always be a camera there. I'm not sure why, but what I do know why, one of them is you can't, people like doing the transcript do it on what is like a fancy typewriter. It's a stenographer machine where you can type it hundreds of words per minute, right? And you effectively are there for legal reasons, because they effectively, on a legal basis, can't trust that the machine that's recording everything is perfect. So they put it to some degree on the human to keep keep the transcript. And then that makes the transcript of the court proceedings legal. So I wonder if there's going to be regulation in general of like could we see regulation in certain parts of the world I don't even know how you scale it, right? Because just like with offshoring, if you try to do that, where like you need, because I know there's regulation within a certain level of medical stuff where like you have a medical office, you need a receptionist.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this might not apply to everything, but you absolutely need a receptionist legally. So, what what
They just sit
levels?
there
Yeah,
because the law hasn't changed. Yeah, I think if we're going to see, so I guess that's sort of, if we're talking about stifling the integration of AI, there's two ways in which that would occur. That would be ease of adoption, which covers quite a wide basis. So that's, do people actually want to use it, even if it's better? And then, okay, so let's take, for example, let's just say theoretically that any distribution company has to, it's like some law, this is made up, that they have to have you know oh, I know one. So anytime I'm operating a forklift, right, company policy dictates that there has to be another person there, right? But if they get rid of everyone but one person, they can't get rid of everyone but one person, because then legally I wouldn't be able to operate anything. I'd have to have another person there. So like they couldn't fire both of us, like, so like the, so as far as like ease of adoption goes, there would be scenarios because of previous sort of laws and regulations where even though that person's no longer needed, they don't actually they don't lose their job just because of the, oh, you have to have a linesman or a groundsman, or when you're working on a railroad, even if a robot's doing it, there has to be a foreman, or there's just sort of like regulations or like laws, like you said about the secretary, there has to be someone there. So then they'd have to change that law. How long is it going to take to change that law? And then the second one would be, if, because I've been thinking about this, if they were going to actually regulate AI, the only way to regulate it would be adoption rates of companies. So you go to Walmart and you're like, okay, and this would be proactive. This would be proactive, sort of stifling instead of just innate stifling, where just due to society and due to the way that we operate, things don't get taken care of quickly. But proactive stifling of AI would be, they go, okay, here's the deal. You have your congressmen or your state senators, wherever the regulation falls, or your members of parliament, and they pass legislation that's like, I get that you have a kiosk that can take care of everything at your little corner store, but we're going to make sure that you have to have at least one employee at all times legally in the kiosk. I don't see something like that happening, but that is a feasible way to regulate it. So we have the technology, but we don't actually, even if we implement it, no one loses their job.
So, if I could butt in here, this is the common criticism of capitalism when it comes to advancement, right? And there's barriers to this on a materials front, right? Where I heard recently on a podcast with Jimmy Carr, comedian, he mentions, about like automation and stuff like that a little bit, but he mentioned something that I'd never known as far as how it exactly went down, but like effectively whaling, right, used to be the biggest industry in America at one point, hunting whales for oil, right? It dried up over 2 years because of petroleum, like mass ability to get oil out of the ground.
Yep.
So it all went away. This whole industry, people invested in tons of ships to do this, you name it. All of a sudden, they're trying to sell them to the Navy or whatever, right? To get rid of them, you name it. But it's effectively like these these industries can dry up very quickly because there's no sauce left. There's nothing you could do. No regulation.
I mean, you don't even need the sauce anymore.
I guess you could have regulated like how much oil can be non-whale but like who's agreeing to
Yeah,
that?
they could have in theory, and well, that's the thing is that no one really gives a shit. So that's why lobbying is so important. So if the whaling
Real quick,
industry
though.
is
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to finish my thoughts and I'll lose it. Basically, what I was going to say is like the common criticism of capitalism is that when there's an automation of some sort, instead of cutting worker hours or keeping the same hours, they output way more work because they have power tools, they have whatever to be able to do more, right? There's way more that they can do in a day. There's way more work output. They make more money for the company in general. Instead of that, they will commonly just, we'll now cut labor costs even more because we need less people to do the same amount of work. So instead of a company trying to overproduce or expand its own operation because it now has better technology to provide to more people, whatever its services, the common thing is just to cut back. So this is like part of why you would even want the regulation there, but I don't know where's the moat, right? How do you know what industry is even going to be alive in 5 years because of some automation project that someone makes open source within that 5 year period for your thing that your entire company destroys? Real quick, one more thing. A single line of code completely killed I believe it was the company that made OpenGL. Forgot their name, but they had these special computers that were really expensive, like $100,000 computers that basically made animations, right? Well, when John Carmack came along and made, they made software and all that and made the Doom series. Well, a single line of code became their renderer, where it was like a Silicon Graphics Inc. SGI, right? They made a single line of code that made it so that this entire industry this entire like company was obsolete, because what $100,000 computer, now a home computer that anyone could buy to play Doom, could do. It could render these real-time graphics. It wasn't as high quality and all that stuff, but it made them no, I forget the line of code exactly. I'm not that much of a nerd. I just know about this. But basically, the code itself made it so that you could render those real-time 3D graphics on a normal computer at the time, what was considered normal. So that's just a single line of code killing an entire company. And they started like trying to use it themselves. They had to pivot to like making their server business be the bulk of their income, and it didn't work, and they still went down anyways. So that's a good example of like information technology is very often destroyed by a single line of code or some new innovation, is my point.
Well, I think so. Like a great example, sort of like as I'd mentioned, lobbying and why it's so important. So an industry we can talk about is trucking and self-driving vehicles. So if they start to integrate that nowadays, at least with how big lobbying is, I think that there would be a lot of blocks to that. And I think that there would be a lot of truckers who would say, oh, yeah, check this out. We're not going to drive for 2 months. Enjoy watching your country collapse. And I've talked to a lot of truckers, and I can tell you this, they would do that. They would watch the whole place. They'd watch people starve because that's how much they love it. Truckers, they love trucking. I mean, they live it. That's their job. That's their livelihood. And then they live and breathe. I mean, they live on the road, right? So that's one of those things where it could not be in a period of 2 years. If it was in a period of 2 years, because back then, okay, there was a far less regulation on commerce, far less. There was no protectionist policies for the little man, yeah, and truckers are also sort of tend to be somewhat anti-government as well, anti-authority, anti-establishment. It's sort of the nature of being on the road, I think, does it to them.
The funniest
So
thing
I think
about
that
the
that would
trucker is
take
like
it would take a while.
the trucker's kind of the thinker of our generation. They have the most time to listen to radio and audiobooks, and
Yeah,
they have a
yeah.
ton of time to just think about shit. Because
So
the job
what
is
you
kind of
would
mindless at
see,
certain points.
so what you might see is that you do have the self-driving, but legally you have to have someone in the truck.
So
So the trucker keeps his job, but the rate of accidents go way down. So we get the benefits from the technology. No one loses their job. Now, then in 5 or 6 or 7 years, then maybe one company's like, oh, we're going to go full self-driving, or we're going to cut back on this, or we're going to cut back on that, and they're just going to kind of change things around, and then maybe we see a death of an industry, but it can't be that quick. It can't be that fast. I mean, it can be, right? And feasibly, it could be, right? In a theoretical, like, if we didn't have the way that things are currently, there's nothing stopping us right now from mass implementing Tesla's self-driving in every single tractor trailer, semi truck. There's nothing truly stopping us. The technology is there, right? And also, the more implementation, the better that the self-driving is going to get, because
yeah,
it learns off of
it's
data.
very close, but you're right in principle within like the next 2 years probably. But
Yeah. But it would be extremely devastating to do it like that.
So over close to 10 years ago now, there was the book called The War on Normal People. It was written by Andrew Yang, the presidential candidate during no, was it 10 years ago, or was he going up to 2020? I can't remember.
2016.
Okay.
He ran in 2016.
Okay. The point is, it was nearly 10 years ago, well over 5 years ago. He talked about how trucks are going to be automated. And he basically said it is, in fact, the easiest thing to automate is long haul highway driving. And he, for the most part, is still not wrong. But what we're talking about here is this guy had already talked about this in particular. He said, you probably, especially with automating of trucking, you are probably going to have to pay a severance to every trucker that is trucking. Because eventually it's going to be so automated they don't need to be in the cab anymore. Right.
Exactly.
And, he kind of, I think he vaguely talked about a trucker that is trucking. Thank you. I'm glad I'm good at
that trucking trucker is trucking.
I'm going to fucking shoot both of you. But anyways, the point is, he said you're probably going to have to pay them a severance package at some point, because a lot of them are owner and operator of their own damn truck. So there's going to have to be some sort of program to make sure that they keep getting money. Because if not, they own the truck, they will stop the freeway. And he said this is effectively, the country would shut down. It's not that they would stop shipping. It's they could shut the entire country down with their trucks. Literally, single truck will block a 3-lane highway. And that's what that's like what most highways max out at across America, for example. And like on average. And then a lot of it's 2-lane highways. You could shut everything down. Everyone has to detour around you, or the mass highways are just fucked. And even truckers that didn't want to join the protest or automated trucks will not get past. You're screwed. So I think
because there's truck lanes off there as well. There's like a single truck lane. It's going to slow traffic down, and then you get the effect where one person slows down, everyone slows down. So even if people can get around them in like a 3-lane, the point is that they fucked traffic so badly that it's like it would cost, if they did it for like a year, it would be probably very difficult to calculate the amount of money actually lost.
The amount of lives lost, actually.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of accidents too.
Well, no, over a single month, like so many like shipments would stop. Some people would like, that's enough for
Not get what they need.
diabetes patients, you name it, like just tons of people dead, medicine not getting where it needs to be, you name it. And they're basically, you've got an entire like group of people that has shortwave radios to talk to each other and plan it and just spread it across and burn the whole country down because you're not paying them anymore. They got a mortgage.
But in another context, though, that is the biggest justification and reason to completely automate it, because they're a thorn. It's the same way the TfL, Transport for London, they go on strike all the time. Just love going on strike, and they constantly want more money. Now, when it comes to like the people who are like picking up the trash and stuff like that, and then kind of like inside the tube stations and train stations, I'm sure they don't get paid worth a shit. But the people who just sit on the tube and just start stop, I get my 15-minute my break, start stop, I'm eating my lunch, start stop. They get paid like 60,000, 65,000 pounds a year. Maybe close to 70 sometimes, if and that's not bad money, like at all. I'd be happy to do that job. It's not that but they do want more, and I get that they want more money, and that's fine. But to me, as a citizen of this, well, as a resident, not a citizen, as a resident of here, the moment I can't get to where I want to get on time because they're striking, I'm like, fuck them. Fuck them. Automate it. Fire every one of them. Automate the fucking thing. I don't want to ever have to deal with this again. You have like multiple times now, but that's the thing is, so on one hand, the benefit of the trucker and the transportation is that it affects everyone. And that's the drawback, is that it affects everyone. Because now when 80% of the population is suffering from that, they're going to immediately, because that's the way the democracy works, right? They're going to say, legislate it now, arrest every single one who gets in the way of doing this, because that's what they did to the air traffic controller. The air traffic controller is the best example we have of something like this. In industry using its power to halt production or whatever, they went on strike. The federal government said, no. They nationalized it, and they said, if you ever think about going on strike, we will put your ass in fucking prison. They don't go on strike anymore.
The irony there is air traffic control is a really good job, like pay-wise. Like, it's pretty incredible from what I've heard. I don't know if that's true as of today, but I don't know. I think,
but back when they had the strikes, maybe it wasn't as much as they thought they should get.
Yeah. But I think like we're now at like a point where maybe honestly OpenAI is now like, we're waiting on they're basically going to have, it seems like a developer day, right? Kind of like Neuralink is and Tesla AI Day, right? Where they effectively, oops, made myself full screen. Lex is back. Anyways, effectively they have their hi buddy. Effectively they have this upcoming AI Day, right? Where they're going to present all the stuff they're doing. They may be presenting the fact that they might be making their own chip fab, stuff like that. People are theorizing. Or if it's not going to be that, it's going to be some sort of device, kind of like the Echo device that Amazon has, where you just have a device you can talk to ChatGPT with. Who knows? But they might be doing all sorts of things. We're just in speculation land for now because I'm not inside the building. But my point is, we're waiting on stuff like this to come. But what we will see is possibly OpenAI as another big company that is very capable over time of automating, you name it, right? You think of it, you name it, we get AGI within the next 5 years, and everything can be automated so fast that everything gets extremely cheap. Everything's a race to zero. That's like probably the best outcome, unless the governments of the world can figure out some way to instate some sort of universal basic income. I don't really see a way out of this scenario. Universal basic income probably being the best possible outcome in the short term, because it's not against a capitalist system. You can still make money outside of it. And a lot of people think it's like something where you have to print money or you have to overly tax the rich. It's more of a percentage based thing where it's roughly the same taxes that the rich would be paying anyways. So you're probably better off with a system like this in the longer run. Because I can't really picture a system. Go ahead.
Instead of UBI, we do like these pods where they have to like give some of their body heat away in exchange for money, certain amount of hours per day or something. Not because we won't be able to have fusion or something like that, just because that's the dignity cost you have to pay to be in the system. What do you think?
I think that defeats the purpose of universal basic income, but it's possible we could examine that later.
Sure. Well, there's going to be pluses and minuses of if you're just giving away like money, basically. So I don't know. What do you think the effects of that are going to be at scale?
Mass drug overdose. If we do UBI, mass drug overdose, all over the countries. Certain amount of people.
Yeah, because one, there's like lack of like purpose and like the opportunities will get crushed. Maybe depends. Who knows? There might be other scenarios.
I think that defining waged labor to purpose is a sort of socially constructed misnomer. I think that they're completely not connected. I think you can have purpose through that thing, but I don't think, again, we have to think, okay, I should say waged work, not waged labor, because work and labor, I think we've talked about, there's two different concepts. Oh, and I do want to correct the record. They did jail some of the protesters, but they fired 12,000 air traffic controllers. 12,000. They fired them and banned them from any sort of federal job for life. And it was during Reagan's administration. Yeah. I think 800 got their jobs back then when Clinton became president, I was reading. But yeah, this was a massive deal. They said, okay, goodbye, 12,000 of you out of here. But point being is like, in regards to the UBI and like, people don't have purpose, like the people that would right now quit their job for a universal basic income stipend, they do not derive any purpose from their job. Okay. If they're making like $19, $20 an hour, I'd say about 80% of them do not give a shit about their job. Anyone who makes below a certain amount, they don't give a shit about their job, even if they like their job, because it doesn't pay good enough. And then above a certain amount, they might like the money, but they still might not give a shit about their job, right? So the people's purpose for healthy people or people that are working in, like, how do I put this? Even if I made $1 million a year, okay, but I was like stacking boxes, that's not really giving me purpose. It's not getting me up out of bed. What's getting me up out of bed is the $1 million a year, right? Now, if I worked with like animals or something, then it'd be a little different. I'm doing something I have a passion for, but that's not how most people's jobs operate.
Real quick, the point of like universal basic income in conception is everyone gets paid. The richest people, it's technically, if you pay more in taxes than your universal basic income, it is a rebate for you at best. That's an of course. So it's more of just it's a simple output of there's this many people, this is what they get, and nothing else. There's no anything There's nothing like tied to that. You just get paid for being past a certain age. Perhaps we do something with like prisoners where we don't pay them, or we put it away in a bank for when they get out, you name it, right? But the point is, you get paid no matter what. And the point of that is that the current system within America, especially, is if you go on welfare, it pays more than certain jobs do. And if you quit, if you get that job, you're no longer eligible for welfare. With the universal basic income system, you just gave yourself a raise. You could think of a 4-person family of over 18, right? Who is eligible to receive this. Their rent is effectively paid just by existing. They're no longer like worried about that rent check. No, you're going to have people that fucking spend that rent check. They're lost souls that are always going to be homeless or whatever because
there's
drug
just
habits.
a certain percentage of the population that are just fucked. They're just fucked. In a perfect society, no perfect society, in a perfect structure, you could have the as close to perfect as possible. It's just a percentage that's just fucked because they just don't have the. If we were just living in a village or something and farmers or whatever, maybe they'd be able to just like pick berries and, hang out in the sun. But in the industrialized sort of technological information society, they can't cut it. They can't hack it. And that's nothing to do with intelligence. It's just not for them.
So here's where like we have a silver lining eventually, right? Is that everything gets fucking cheap, right? Cheap to produce, cheap to do, cheap to this, cheap to that. You and I had a conversation earlier about what is like the best microphone setup that you can buy effectively just with your money. In the past, it would have cost you roughly $30,000 for a proper soundproof room. My microphone isn't perfect for a few reasons, but one of the things that I have is AI technology in the background, cutting out all the background noise that you can't hear, right? At least in theory. I hope I didn't forget to turn it on. That would be funny. But the point is technology made what used to be a whole like foam proofing your entire room process no longer an issue. Excuse me, I just had to sneeze my soul out and I didn't want to do it on camera. Okay.
Let's go, time traveler. I saw you disappear.
Anyways, so my point is that was abrupt.
I would like to say that UBI needs to be far more complex than just a simple stipend. And and I have a lot of different ideas on this.
Why do you think it needs to be more complex out of curiosity? Because I think you need regulations on like rent gouging, for example.
Sure. Well, because it's not really fair for me to be in an industry for 40 years and then my industry dies and then I get paid the same UBI that some 18-year-old wet behind the ears who's not done a lick of work in his fucking life gets paid. That's horseshit. That's horseshit.
I'll give you that life ain't fair. Unfortunately.
But there has to be some level of give and take so people buy into the system. So a good example. So minimum wage is a tiered system in the UK. Minimum wage for a 40-year-old is not minimum wage for an 18-year-old. If you're 16 years old, your minimum wage is a lot lower than if you're 35. Their minimum that they can pay someone as they get older goes up. So that's one thing to consider, right? So your universal basic income as a single 18-year-old does not necessarily need to be as high as in a scenario where most people lose their jobs due to technology and are trying to have families, right? And this is while the costs haven't gone to zero and we're not living in post-scarcity, right? So
it's not
going to be as high as like a 30-year-old. Exactly. So it needs to be more complex or at least more nuanced.
Possibly. But what I will say is that more than likely, even if it's uncomfortable for a while, having your basic needs met as far as food and housing. Most people
Yeah, I
survive
think
and get by,
that's
right.
yeah. I think it should be implemented step by step, starting with a universal basic income. Then we can start to factor in other things. Once everybody gets the base level, right? Once we implement that and we have that going, then we can say, okay, so you were a finance manager for how many ever years? We don't need you anymore. You lost your job. Okay, you were at a certain level of living. You did this. You've worked and worked and worked. Social Security, guess what? Doesn't exist. There's going to be a cutoff for people. Like, there's no point for us to pay into Social Security, right? Like, there's no reason I should pay taxes and pay Social Security, except for the fact that my dad's generation paid Social Security their entire life. They deserve it, right? But even though I'm going to pay in, I'm not going to get it. So like there has to be, like, when that tough life isn't fair, it's not going to fly when that happens. Like, there's going to be
Well,
like a lot of fucking issues.
I agree that there'll be a lot of issues, but my other concern is within the math. I don't know the math for staggering wages with UBI. Like, how do we pay for that? Because the math works out, at least within America, according to Yang, who did the math, right? Is part of it would be a restructuring of what we already spend our money on. So certain things would just go to straight hard cash instead of the way it currently goes. And it's not a perfect system, like I said. It's just a better system than what we have right now, in theory. Just based on some of the experiments that have been done in other places, it made certain
We
people
could
work
basically
more.
take all welfare, all unemployment, and all disability, and we could take all the money we're spending on that, restructure it, and then try and do a UBI. We could also take from some other organizations that, stuff like that, like food stamps, things of that nature, all the money that goes into that, like, theoretically. So I understand what you're saying. I'm saying implement that, yes, but then at a point in time, it's
Well,
going to need to be a little bit more advanced.
So there's a theory that I think Bernie Sanders had, where I think part of the way that they would have paid for like the college stuff, and I don't know if he ever proposed UBI. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to Bernie Sanders, but one of the ways that you would do that is by um, taxing the buys and sales of, what's it called, stocks in general, right? Like a tiny percent. And there's so much volume that the stock market does per day. If you tax it a tiny amount, obviously you wouldn't want to do too much, because then you create less trade. In
You
theory,
disincentivize.
well, in theory, you would collect enough over time to pay back all the college loans, for example. I think this is what he said. I might be thinking of someone else, but this is an example of a way that it could have been done to generate more income for this effective big pool of money that we hand people for, I don't know, being older. Your pay bracket goes up. I I don't know. I don't know how realistic that is, because we might have to, for example, this is something Sam Altman kind of talks about, is like you eventually get to a point where OpenAI, at current rate, especially if they keep getting GPUs, could, with 100% certainty, capture most of. So, if not just them, especially if they create AGI, though, capture most of the wealth of information technology. So, their company itself does 99% or so of all work that is intelligent and profits off of all of it. So, the theory is that they would have to remit most of that.
Because I imagine their overhead at some point just drops.
Yeah, their goal is to
Because
be a capped profit company, where the rest of it will go to, they said, either straight up redistribution of wealth, or it will go to scientific research, for example, which I guess at some point just becomes buying more GPUs for the scientific research.
Because tax the rich, the 1%, doesn't work when they're the founder. Doesn't work. They get all their money from stock. Elon Musk says, okay, cool, my salary's $1.
Well, Sam doesn't own I don't think he owns any equity or any stock.
No, I'm just saying that's the big tax thing. It's like, okay, you tax the rich. Okay. So for people making like 300,000 or 400,000, sure, you could tax them pretty heavily. But the CEOs that are making, let's take AT&T CEO, he gets paid millions. He says, okay, pay me right below that tax bracket. And instead of giving me salary, you give me stock bonuses, stock options, things like this, things that are going to give me, fiscally help me, or I take and okay, don't do that. But every 2 years I get a new car. Every, and then this, and then all of this is paid for, and this and that. And I want, and then all my kids' health insurance is paid until they're 30. Or you write into a contract, just the crazy stuff. Like you can, you know what I mean? Like it's not actually going to be effective, but taxing the buying and selling of stocks, it's really hard to work around that.
Yeah, well, the point about that I'm making is like, even with that, the tax the rich does not work in mass, and I don't think you want to tax the rich. I think I'm more for like a flat tax. I think if we did things the way Russia did, perhaps less. So we either choose between a sales tax only or an income tax only, and then you just have that raw amount that you have. And if you want to increase your government income, you have to have more people. That's the way I think about it, right? That would probably be better for a government to have the incentive to, instead of taxing the population they have more, that'll eventually start shrinking soon. They just want to create more people so that they have more taxes to work with. If you go with all the government corruption shit, which is true to think about, but that would be a better.
I think a flat tax, unless you make so little money that like say it's a 15% or a 20% tax, unless you make so little money yearly, right? That you're below what is considered for the region the livable.
The entire Roman Empire, I think, existed on like a 0.3% tax of income. Yeah.
Probably a lot more efficient, a lot less.
Different times, as far as like the amount of shit a government has to do now in comparison is big, but it's probably not 50% of your total income big in any way, especially with automation coming into the picture, right? You can get most of these things that these pencil pushers do done very quickly now. And I'm not saying that we should throw them out. I'm just saying that the obvious thing is that if you're going to cut cost on things, maybe your spending is one of them, Mr. Government. So the other thing is, the other option is just a flat sales tax. I believe that there's a group trying to get it passed here in America. It's called the Fair Tax Law, I believe, but I don't know exactly how you regulate this because they wouldn't tax resales. So if I sell you this cup, there's no tax on it at all, right? I'm just selling it to you. That's after I bought it from the Yeti company, right? So you would have to, in order to exist as a business at scale, submit to the sales tax, obviously, like any business does already, right? But there would be slight underground markets of like people selling shit in mass, but I don't think it would be at the scale that it would matter. But effectively, you only tax people at purchase of things. There's no income tax, or I think even property tax. So I think in general, probably having no property tax. Well, I get the property tax thing in terms of like military stuff, where it's like, we're protecting your border. You pay your property tax. We keep our border, right? That would be the logical reason you would even have a property tax. But having like basically, we need a better tax system that creates a flat amount of income that they can expect, or an amount of income where if you have a fair tax one, right, then all the government's need for more money becomes incentive to create more sales. So you create a better, more booming economy, and now you get more money per year in the coffers. So that's what I think is like needed here. We need a different incentive structure in general. So UBI is an example of different incentive structure for at least the worker, where even certain one of the things that he proposes that you would also get more money economy wise through taxes, because the entrepreneurial spiritual type in your country would create more businesses because they have an extra 1,000 a month or whatever. I guess you do 2,000 now with the way inflation is, but you get the point. So you create like we just need a better incentive structure on every front, because
I agree.
if not, the best case scenario is probably an insane race towards automation over the next 5 years, and everything goes to zero. We're effectively like, there's no charges on things that you get. Things kind of become free because the robot runs forever. So I don't know.
Yeah.
We've kind of got off into the weeds of like, what do we do on this end? But was there anything else you had on mind over there? I know it's a little later for you right now. Are you all good, Johnny?
I mean, it's just this is like 100 years ago when we had this technology, but we had the systems we did 100 years. It would implementation would just be so much simpler. But things are so, especially with like globalism. Not that it's a bad or a good thing. It's a thing. It's like nationalism or it's just it is a concept that exists. You have to deal with it. But because of how interconnected things are, there's just so many fucking working parts that affect the other, especially when it comes to taxes and how complicated our tax system and how much stuff is based on our economy and who makes what money and how many people have this job and how many people are going to do this and what happens if we do that. And it's just this fucking domino effect of every little thing. You know, a butterfly flaps its wings and the fucking price of grain in China changes, so it's like,
we've seen the lines getting built in Saudi Arabia.
All those weird cities.
Well, it's just one so far. They're moving roughly like 100 tons of dirt a day, I think. And they'll have the infrastructure up in like a couple of years, I think.
Is that the city where like the people live in like the weird pod things and then it's just a line?
Yep. That is absolutely being built. And if more countries decide to build stuff like that, they have 100,000 construction workers out there, by the way.
I mean, okay, I know that I've seen like a lot of the like sort of, I guess, right wing sort of, oh, we're gonna live in the pod and eat the bug. But if I'm like a 19-year-old, right, and all I want to do is like go to work, go back to my apartment, play video games, and hang out, and you're telling me I take a step out of my apartment and then I just get on a train that just goes straight. I don't have to worry about going here, going there. There's my job. There's the place I get stuff, there's the grocery store, and it's just right there. And it's just a train that just goes this direction and then goes that direction and then goes this direction and then goes that. Like, that's extraordinarily efficient.
Here's the problem.
Not for me.
Here's the problem.
Not for me.
I won't eat the bugs crowd, right? I agree with him in principle. I want a little like nice little land out in the middle of nowhere where I only
Someone
have to
has
deal
to
with
eat the
people I want
bugs.
to deal with, and I have a few cows to eat every year, right? And my point is that these aren't the wants and needs of the average people these days. I think a lot of people are just going to get in the pod and eat the bugs because they get to go
Yeah.
play
Well, they need
video
to.
games.
They
do
need
their
to.
Coomer games. It's your bread and circuses.
If they need to get in the pod, they need to eat the bugs because it's efficient and it lowers the cost of everything. I'm not going to do it, and I'm not going to force them to get in the pod and eat the bugs, right? I'm not going to force them to. But like, if you think of what the most efficient city is going to be like, and how are we reaching sort of like post scarcity as a concept, then like, I have really bad news. We're eating bugs. We're eating pods and we're living inside bugs. It's even worse than we thought.
I don't think bugs are, by the way, that efficient. I think the problem is the mechanism of delivery. It's harder to do in mass. It's not as simple as cutting up a giant cow. So until you invent the bug that's as big as a giant cow, you're probably fucked for eating the bugs.
Cow
in my
bug.
opinion. Yeah, the big
AGI will invent the bug cow.
In theory,
Maybe it'll
we
be
could
good
grow
meat,
them
though.
in pods with higher amounts of oxygen.
Lobsters are just ocean bugs.
That's a good point. Now,
people love lobster.
The reason you wouldn't be able to make a bug bigger than it is now for your bug steaks is because of oxygen. It's like the more oxygen in the air, the more it can be delivered through their thorax and all that shit, their exoskeleton. So insects were way bigger in the past in prehistoric periods.
But there's not as much oxygen now.
Yeah. There was more oxygen, I believe, because trees didn't really have anything that would eat them. So they just produced a fuck ton of oxygen.
I think the atmosphere was different as well.
Yeah, there's a bunch of like little things like that. But
big
bugs. But
Big
aside from
bugs.
the big bug point, is you run up against efficiency, right? Where it's difficult to do very inefficient things, right? But what you were talking about is like the perfect like bug city, bug pod city scenario. You probably won't see that as much because what is artificial general intelligence, right? As of right now, it's a very inefficient thing to do very complicated things efficiently, right? That's kind of stupid to say, but you when you get to degrees of automation, that means people can live anywhere. So I still envision the world where people still spread out. They're just kind of interconnected on the internet with each other more than anything. Most people, their best friends for the rest of their life will be people they very rarely see until travel technology becomes not instant, but completely automated, where you just hop in your Tesla car and it takes you where you're going, hasslelessly.
It can't be any worse than living in New York. There's no way. There's no way it's worse than living in New York. Look at New York. It's a shithole.
Never been.
It's a shithole. I'm never going to go. I've seen it. I've seen what it looks like. But if you do like the big Lime City, yeah, and it's got all the solar panels on the outside and the public transportation super cheap, and I have a reasonable sized place and it's very
Saudi
low
Arabia.
cost.
They will fuck you up if you do crime. So it's probably a nice place to live. I might go in the pod.
Dubai?
If all goes downhill for Joby, he's going in the fucking Saudi pod. I don't drink alcohol anyways.
If Dubai had a pod, I'd live. It's like the Japanese pods, I'd live in the little Japanese pod, but not the New York pod. Because when I go out in Tokyo and I live in the pod, it's this really cool city. But when I live in the pod in New York, there's people shitting in the streets and there's needles everywhere, and I get stabbed and shot.
That's a good point.
You can't put me. You can't put me in the pod and then have me get shot when I try to go to the convenience store.
It would be it would be very hard to like actually immigrate to Japan as like an American, from what I hear, for obvious reasons.
You can
but,
teach English.
Yeah, but the point
Is the
is
root.
like, if you could just immigrate there, there's certain aspects of Japan that like sound awesome. It's like cheap ass fucking abandoned housing is in a lot of places out there because of the collapsing birth rate.
I couldn't do the work. Couldn't do the work.
What to like work on?
Their work culture. Their work culture is insane.
I'm picturing a scenario where you have your remote job and live in your Japanese little mansion you bought. It would be nice. Lots of salmon. They love it out there.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So that would be my general point of like what you would want
me in
to
the
do out
pod.
there. Put you in the pod.
I want to. I'm convinced. I've changed my mind. I want to live in the pod.
Look, I would be honest. At some point, if all like became meaningless, video games and longevity would suit me for a couple hundred years. I'd be fine.
I joke. There's no way I could live like we are living outside in the outskirts of London, because I was like, there's no way I can live in an apartment that's like less than 700 square feet. I refuse to do it. I'm too big. I need space. I need open space that I'm not actually using, but I can look at and say, look, there's not stuff over there. Nice.
Is housing really
There's not a wall
expensive there
close
still?
to me.
Like to get the apartment?
I think we're paying £2,000,
Fuck.
and I'm paying 1,000. She's paying £1,000, and that's actually a really good price. So, but it's a 2-bedroom.
Me and a friend
It's
recently.
not a. It's close to 900 square foot, and it's a 2-bedroom.
Me and a friend. Well, that's pretty good actually, but still way too expensive. I know it's all you can do, but as far as like everything's fucking expensive. But me and a friend talked about recently, like it didn't take long. It took like a span of 5 years to be the boomer, saying, I remember when I could get a burger for like fucking $2 or $4 here in America. Like that's how out of hand like inflation with food especially really is. So that's where like you know there's Bill Gates like buying up all the land to like stop cattle farming. I don't know how true all that is, but I wouldn't put it past the guy. It's one of those things where all the beef regulation that we have is insane. The government's done regulation like this shit in the past where they paid pig farmers to kill their pigs because they thought it would help with the price of pork at the time, which was the cheapest thing that you could eat during the Great Depression. So they just made it more expensive to get pork. Like that, they literally like just did that. Yeah. I don't remember the exact.
So,
go ahead.
Well, so this was in June. I'll give you the average price. So basically the way they do it is by zone, because there's like a gobstopper. You know, gobstopper, you lick it and it has another layer. That's kind of how the city of London is. You have zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. And hey, Jasmine, what zone are we in? Zone 4. Okay. So zone 4, a 2-bedroom averaging is going to be about 1,300 plus. But there's some really small 2-bedrooms. A lot of the 2-bedrooms we looked at were like, what, 500 to 600 square foot? And yeah, but the other thing is, but your average price in like zone 1 for a 2-bedroom is so like there's a lot of factors. So I would say for location, average price, not great. But then you have to think, we live in a place with a 24/7 gym. We have a front desk manager who's there 24/7. You know what I mean? Like it's also not a dangerous area. Like we could have gotten a really cheap place where they have all the stabbings. We could some real cheap stuff. So, but that's like the
just
thing
wrap
is like,
yourself in fucking phone books and go to work.
yeah,
Do they have phone books anymore? You can't even protect
yeah. I don't
yourself.
know. I don't think they do.
But
and then distance to tube station as well is like really fucking important.
This is a little bit of a topic I just remembered I did want to bring up now that we're on this topic. How likely do you think the mass remoting of work and layoffs and even school, a lot of it's becoming remote, or there's just not enough kids in the area to go to the school? Basically, I saw a TikTok recently of a group of kids. Well, granted, they weren't kids, but a group of millennials bought a fucking high school and renovated the whole thing out and made it a massive apartment building, right? With a gymnasium, a large kitchen that you could go to, and a couple other amenities. But effectively, like it was a big, well furnished, very high level renovation. Like everything was really nice. You had decent sized apartments, these classrooms that were split and stuff. How likely do we think these giant fucking office buildings that are going to be useless can be turned into significantly, more interesting like living spaces, to say the least, but better in general in terms of there's more housing to go around because we have like a housing crisis.
The housing crisis is it's due to a variety of reasons. I think that would certainly help, but some of the other issues that kind of won't help is that what is the property tax? My property tax living in the middle of nowhere, not that bad, but my property tax as a landlord, 4-letter word, the more it goes up, the more they tax it, the more I raise my rent. And if I have a mortgage out and they start fucking around with percentages on that, then I have to raise it as well. I mean, I certainly think that would help. But what really is going to be interesting is what happens when people can remote work, right? Why would they live in the city? Now, if you're 18 years old, and you're in your 20s and 30s, living in a city is awesome. Okay? It's great. Super fun. There's so much stuff to do. There's like just all the really that's all there is to it. There's so much stuff to do. I mean, I always have cool stuff that I can go see. I don't give a fuck about that when I hit like 40. You know what I mean? And those are your people that are going to want to get the fuck out of Dodge. So I think that can help the cost of living crisis as well. So if we get rid of a lot of the office spaces, but to be honest, I think that you could have a threefold increase in the amount of available housing, and I think the prices would stay the same, because I think that like it's about creating a renting society. Is sort of like the BlackRock, you know what I mean?
The problem
and I don't think they would let something go through.
The regulation is always aimed to fuck me, right? It's never aimed at like BlackRock. You are not allowed to buy consumer fucking homes. You cannot like just a genuine home, like a family homes is the term they use, right? They buy them in mass with all sorts of shell companies. And it's just one of those things where the regulations are always there to fuck you, but never the fucking big company. So
the big company make the money.
Yeah. So
you don't. I don't.
Well, on the bright side, I think that no matter how bad things get with the whole you own nothing and will be happy, the automation of everything will give power to literally everyone to create whatever they want.
Joke's on them. I already own nothing and I'm already unhappy.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we.
If owning nothing made you happy, we'd be very happy men.
I feel hurt by that, but I agree.
I said if we.
Yes. I'm going to cut the podcast off a little earlier here. That's a fucking good dark.
Did I hurt you that much?
No. I have shit to do, and we delayed an hour. I'm hungry.
Okay.
I am a
what are you
big
gonna have?
boy. I don't know what I'm gonna have. I'm
I
just
feel like
going
I'm
to.
always eating.
This is where you just go into the fridge and you try to make up what you can eat, and you walk away with the grated cheese and just eat that at your desk.
Right back there. If I didn't, I would just eat like blocks of cheese and like I just cook meat in a pan and just eat it. I remember when she came over, I like cooked a steak. And did I cook anything? Remember when you and your brother visited? And didn't I just cook steak? No, I didn't make it. I was like, I'll cook. Yeah, I'll cook, honey. And her and her brother were visiting. I was like, yeah, I'll cook. Let me cook. And I cooked 3 steaks. And then I walked in, didn't serve anyone anything, slapped them down, put my steak on a plate and just started eating. That's dinner, baby. And they're like, and she's like, what the hell? Well, you're not even going to do like chips, fries, or like a vegetable? And I'm like, no, the steak's this big. It's, that's my steak's this big. That's my meal right there. It's the size of my fucking stomach. So thank God that I'm not living like that.
Good for you, my friend. I am going to go eat. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Hopefully, I feel like this is repetitive as fuck. We're going to figure out the goddamn Twitter streaming eventually. X.com. Fucking.
But now you know, it's not just you. When I tried to do it, it looked like shit. And I have way better internet.
It's the exact same shit. I don't think you have better internet, but it doesn't matter. The point is,
my ping's lower.
Ooh. Okay.
20 milliseconds.
You enjoy your Dota later. I'm
on Dark Tide, dude. I'm on a Dark Tide kick.
Okay. Real quick, I'm going to cut this bit out. You